All right. So my name's John Clement, and we are reporting on our project is on reports, and we're doing chapter 8 and corresponding online. So,
My name's Reid, Medlin.
Hi, my name is Korey Forster.
all right. So we had to read chapter 8, and basically we had to read chapter 8 in both the online book and the hard copy. So basically, with online chapter 8, it talks about the different kinds of feedbacks that you can give to your peers, and that like an example would be like an internal feedback. And what internal feedback is basically the sources that you find that you use within your own information. Your like it. What you have to do is you have to like internalize the information, and you have to make sure that the content that you put within your project is or within any information or with any paper or business report, anything you have to do, you have to make sure the content is like correct and clear and ethical, and that you want to make sure that like whatever sources you use, you know what you're using instead of just like throwing random stuff in there, and that way you can like your internal feedback for yourself and for your paper is, I mean, it's clear for the most for yeah.
And then I read up a little bit on external feedback. External feedback is just information you receive about your performance from various sources, usually verbal, visual, or written. And then just like an example of this would be from like a sports team, and you ask your coach or another player for feedback on your performance. How that would be an example of external feedback. Another example of that would just be like if somebody records a video of you playing in the game or whatever, and you just go back and watch the video. That would be another form of external feedback. And then it says in the online portion of the textbook, it says like assessment of feedback from the receiver is part of the writer's responsibility. So it's pretty much just saying that it's your responsibility to go out and get that feedback to help better yourself and better your performance or whatever you're on.
And you have direct and indirect feedback. Direct feedback is feedback directly from the person reading your report, and indirect is somebody who's not directly the receiver, but they may receive the message, and like somebody said something and they told their friend or something like that.
So basically, the chapter 8 online was just about the feedback and the writing process. And like a couple of notes that I took when I was reading it was when you start doing feedback with like your group and stuff, and not only your group, but with other groups, especially with an online class like this, that's your like connection to your audience. That's kind of where it starts is, you want to give somebody feedback, but you don't want to give them feedback and like be mean about it, I guess is kind of what this chapter is saying. Because it also says you need to be aware of like the person's perspective on things, especially like their religion and politics and stuff. Because I mean, no matter what kind of feedback you're giving, and it's said in there, it's not like whenever in the work field and stuff. Like when you give feedback to somebody, you always want to take that person's feelings into consideration because that's just the right thing to do, basically. And so we also had to read chapter 8 in the textbook, and that was kind of completely different than the online version. So we'll talk a little bit about that one.
And so on the chapter 8 in the written textbook, the first thing that it kind of talks about was how you determine information you need and the best way to go about determining that information you need. I just had 5 bullet points, like to summarize that whole category of just to analyze the research question and topic, identify the audience, just so you know exactly who you're writing to, and just go ahead and determine that before. Establish the scope of the research to just know exactly what you're researching and talking about, and considering the needs of the projects. And then define research activities, which to gather information. primary, secondary, or just whatever kind of sources. And then the last one was develop a work plan, just so you know exactly where you're going with it, and try to just stay on track with that to better help yourself in the future.
Yeah. And it also, like, in the textbook, it talks to compare it to the online version. I think what this would, like, how you can compare it is when you do your research, you have to find research that, like, is efficient and it's easy to, like, when you're when somebody's reading the information, like, they understand it. And that's why it's saying that you need to use, like, when you try to find resources for whatever you're working on, you need to use, like, a library or a bookseller to find relevant either books or online articles, and you don't just want to use some off the wall nonsense to try to make your paper sound better. It's like you need to research what you're doing, and instead of just kind of like coming up with your own stuff, because you're going to look more efficient and professional when it comes to, like, business reports and having to, like, report to somebody within a business if you work under somebody and whatnot. And so I guess a way to relate it to the online chapter 8 would be, like, I mean, especially with the internal feedback, is you're able to, like, find sources that are credible and use them towards your research.
And another thing that it talked about in both the online portion and on the paper copy of the textbook, it also talked about, like, different ways to conduct the research, as in, like, interviews, which is just like an opportunity to ask questions, answer questions, just like different questionnaires, surveys. They also talked about in both of them. And then another one that they had in the textbook that they didn't have in the online part was just to conduct research or conduct observational research, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in that when it talks in that part that it's talking about the how to conduct your primary research, it talks about how well, I guess when you're trying to get feedback, it's easier to use like to gather information that's easily comparable to something, and that way, like, when you're trying to get feedback, somebody can be like, it's easy for somebody to like, understand what you're trying to say.
Another thing with doing research that I personally don't do enough that it talked about was surveys. I think surveys are a great form of research because you get so many different opinions, and it's something that I definitely don't utilize and take advantage enough when I do research or have a paper or project, which I now will probably start doing more just based off of what I read from the textbooks.
Yeah, after reading it, I understand more about how I need to learn how to research and stuff, and it also, like, I guess another form of feedback isn't just feedback from, like, your final product, but also you can get feedback from, like, social media in your research, it says. And, like, you can post questions and get feedback from people that you can use as a source almost. And that way you have, like, firsthand information.
And it was also in both the online portion and textbook. It talks about trying to stay organized and more effectively, right, and efficiently, right?
Yeah.
It's like a huge portion that's a lot of people don't do well enough, is just have, like, a clear plan and organized, just, like, know exactly what you're going to be doing throughout your research, not just in the beginning. But yeah, so it definitely I gained a lot more knowledge just based off of research, because usually in the past I would just primarily just go to internet, find, like, a few websites and use those as my primary sources. I never really thought about using social media or any other, like, surveys, like you said earlier, or interviews. I never utilized those enough, and honestly, I never even think about them when I heard about doing research.
Let's see. I took quite a few notes, and I think of, like, when we start working on our actual project and, like, finding our resources, it's going to be easier to connect our resources, I think, because we're going to be able to give each other feedback on the resources we use and whatnot. But Yeah, so basically, I guess our project is going to cover like how you need to correspond to somebody, like how you need to correspond your online to or your like your online work to your paper or to your resources and stuff. I guess. I mean, this topic's a little difficult, so I guess we got to research more, a little more in depth. But basically, I guess what our project will be is, chapter 8 in the textbook talks about doing the actual research, how to do it, and like get knowledge of that. And then chapter 8 online talks about how to give somebody feedback and make sure that you're like clear about it and like you're nice about it, basically. So
Yeah, that's like a huge portion of having a successful paper is being able to get being able to like interpret and work the feedback into your paper, just to better yourself and better your grade.
but yeah, so I guess that's about it for our topic.